Hey, so this is a review of Unit 6, and this will be similar to what your test questions will be. So number 1, it says Tyler has run 15 miles this month. For the rest of the month, he plans to run the same number of miles each day. There are 12 days left in the month. Before the end of the month, Tyler needs to run at least 35 miles to meet his goal. So which of these inequalities describes this situation where m is the number of miles Tyler runs each day to meet his goal? So first, when I'm working with inequalities, I need to look for my keywords that would tell me which symbol I would use. So for this problem, it says at least 35 miles. So that means he needs to run 35 miles or more. So then it needs to be greater than or equal to 35. And then that right there tells me that B could not be an option because it says less than or equal to 35. And C couldn't be an option because when you switch, so if I had y is greater than 4, well, if I move my variable to the other side, then that means I need to flip my symbol because y needs to be greater than 4. And so if y is greater than 4, then that means 4 is less than y. So that's why your symbol would flip when you rewrite it. So I already know B and C couldn't be answers because of the symbols. So the only difference between A and D is that I have a minus 15 or a negative 15. And then I'm adding 15, so it's a positive 15 on D. And then my 12M. So since there are 12 days left in the month, and he's running the same number of miles each day, then the 12M represents the miles per day for 12 days. And he's already run 15 miles this month. And for his total, he needs to be at 35 or more. So after I figure out how many miles he runs in 12 days total, then I would need to add 15 to that. So D would be my correct answer because the 15 is included towards the 35 miles. On number 2, it says which number line shows all the values of y that make the inequality negative 6y minus 2 is greater than 10. So before I can graph an inequality, I need to solve my inequality so I know what my variable is greater than or less than of. So I have negative 6 times y minus 2 is greater than or equal to 10. So my steps are the same for solving it, just like we've been doing and just like with equations. So I want to use the inverse operations. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides. So that gives me negative 6y is greater than or equal to 10 plus 2, which is 12. And now I need to use the inverse of multiplication, which would be division. So I need to divide both sides by negative 6. So that leaves me with 1y. And 12 divided by negative 6 is negative 2. But remember, when we divide or multiply by a negative, then our sign must change. So my greater than or equal to becomes less than or equal to. So I know that this tells me where my circle needs to go. So my circle needs to be on negative 2, which they are in all 4. My arrow needs to be pointing towards the left. Because if I connected an arrow there, it would be pointing left. So that tells me that C and D would not be possible answers because my arrow has to be pointing to the left. And the symbol has or equal to. So the or equal to portion tells me that -2 is a true solution as well. So my circle needs to be filled in. So my correct answer would be A. Number 3, select all expressions that are equivalent to -4 times x plus 2 minus 2x plus 4. So first we need to try to simplify it as much as possible. So to simplify first, since I have a number to distribute, I need to distribute first. So -4 times x is -4x, and -4 times 2 would be -8. And then I have minus 2x plus 4. So just from using the distributive property, I see that D is equivalent because -4x is the same. Here I have minus 8, but when we have subtraction, remember we can write as addition, and I'd use the opposite. So plus a negative is the same thing as subtracting. And then I have minus 2x, and I have plus 4. So D is equivalent. E is also equivalent because I have my same parts. I just switched these. And as long as you take the sign in front of each number with it when you move it, then that does not change the expression. So that is also equivalent. Okay, but we don't have it simplified all the way. So now I need to combine any like terms that I have. So -4x minus 2x would be -6x. Then I have -8 plus 4, which would be -4. So that tells me that A is equivalent. And we know B cannot be equivalent because I don't have my -8 or my plus -8. And C is not equivalent because you cannot subtract 4 from -6x because they are not like terms. So A, D, and E are the correct answers. Number 4, it says at the start of a hike, a hiker was at an elevation of -50 feet. The hiker climbs at a rate of 15 feet per minute. And it wants us to write an inequality where T represents the number of minutes after the start of the hike when the hiker's elevation was higher than 5 feet above sea level. So what would our inequality be for number 4? So we need to figure out our important information. So we know that it's wanting the hiker to be higher than 5 feet above sea level, which tells me it is a positive 5. And I know that we are starting at -50 feet. So -50 represents my starting elevation. He's climbing at a rate of 15 feet per minute, and since my 15 is positive, I know he's climbing up. So a positive 15 feet per minute. And I know T represents my minute, so that would be 15T would be my feet per minute. And I know that he needs to be higher than positive 5 feet. So higher tells me that my inequality would need to be greater than 5. So if I start at -50 feet and my amount of change is positive 15 feet per minute, then that tells me what my change is each minute. And I know that when I put my minutes in, I need to be at an elevation that is greater than 5 feet. So that would be your inequality. You could also write it as 15t plus negative 50, or 15t minus 50. Okay, on B it says show all the values of t that would make the inequality true. So in order to do that, I need to solve it. So I have negative 50 plus 15t is greater than 5. So I want to work backwards and use the inverse. So I need to add 50 to both sides. That gives me 15t is greater than 55. And then I want to divide both sides by 15. So that tells me that t is greater than 55 divided by 15, which would be 3.6 repeating. Or I could put 3 2/3. So my number line's going by 2's. So I need to figure out where 3 2/3 would be, because that's where my circle would go. So I know halfway between 2 and 4 would be 3. So that would be 3. So I need to go a little over halfway past that for 2/3. So I'm going to put my circle here. So I know my circle would be at 3 2/3. And I know t can be anything that's greater than 3 2/3. So my greater symbol tells me that my arrow needs to point to the right. And because 3 2/3 would not make the inequality true, since it's not greater than 3 2/3, then my circle would stay open, so it would not be filled in. Number 5 says factor to write an equivalent expression. So we've mostly been expanding expressions like on B. So thinking about my expression, so I have negative 9x is one term, and my second term is positive 15x, or 15y, sorry. So to factor, I need to first find the greatest common factor, which means I need to figure out what the largest number is that I could divide evenly into both numbers. So our two numbers are 9 and 15. I know 9, I can multiply 1 times 9. Can't do 2. And I know I can multiply 3 times 3. So my only factors of 9 are 1, 3, and 9. For 15, I can do 1 times 15. 3 times 5. And there is nothing else that I can multiply to get 15 as far as whole numbers go. So looking at my factors, the greatest number that they have in common is 3. So that means my greatest common factor is 3, and I'm wanting to divide 3 out of each of those. So when we expand and apply the distributive property, we multiply by each term inside. Whereas when we're factoring, we're working backwards, so that means we need to divide out of each term. So negative 9x divided by 3. So 3 times what would give me negative 9x? Negative 3x. And then what times 3 is 15y? Well, I know 3 times 5 is 15. And so that would be positive 5y. So my factored expression would be 3 times negative 3x plus 5y. So if you wanted to check that, you would just use distributive property. So 3 times negative 3x is negative 9x, and 3 times positive 5y would be 15y. On B, just want you to expand to write an equivalent expression. So now we're just applying distributive property. So negative 5 times 7m would be negative 35m. Negative 5 times negative 2 would be positive 10. Number 6, Priya is simplifying the expression negative 2 times 4 minus 2x minus 3 minus 2x. So here's her work. So here's our starting expression. Here's what she has after step 1. And then here's what her answer is after step 2. So A tells us that Priya's work is incorrect. And it wants you to explain the error that she made. So looking at step 1, or first looking at the expression, I see a set of parentheses. So that tells me that I need to first apply the distributive property. So negative 2 times 4 is negative 8. And then negative 2 times negative 2x would be negative 4x. So it looks like Priya did not multiply negative 2 by negative 2x. So her error was in step 1, where she has negative 2x instead of positive 4x. Okay, on B, just want you to write an equivalent expression. So to do that, again, we have to worry about our distributive property first. So negative 4 times x is negative 4x. Negative 4 times positive 3 would be negative 12. Then I have minus 12x and plus 5. So it wants us to find an equivalent expression that only has 2 terms. So I need to combine my like terms to get it down as low as I can. So I have negative 4x minus 12x, and then negative 12 plus 5. So I have 2 terms with an x, so if I combine those, that would get me to 1 term. And then when I combine my 2 integers, that would get me to my second term. So negative 4x minus 12x would be negative 16x. Negative 12 plus 5 would be negative 7. So my first term is negative 16x. My second term, negative 7, or minus 7. Okay, on number 7, it says a community center rents their hall for special events. They charge a fixed fee of $200 plus an hourly fee of $22.50. Lynn has $300 to spend on renting the hall for a fundraiser. So using only the money she has, can Lynn pay for a 6-hour event? Okay, so we know she has $300 to spend. She has to pay $200 plus $22.50 per hour. So that tells me that she can only spend $300. So that means that her total has to be less than or equal to $300. She has to pay a $200 fee plus $22. Myself enough room. So we'll do $22.50 per hour plus the $200 fee that she has to pay. And so it wants to know if she can pay for a 6-hour event. Well, without solving the inequality, I know that after she pays the $200 fee, she only has $100 that she can spend. So I can check it a few different ways so I can see what 6 hours would cost. So $22.50 times 6 hours tells me that that would cost $135. and she only has $100 left to spend. So I know that she cannot pay for a 6-hour event. On B, it says using only the money she has, can Lynn pay for a 3-hour event? So again, I could just multiply to see what 3 hours would cost. I know that 3 is half of 6, so I really only need to pay half of the $135. So that means 3 hours would cost $67.50. And I have $100, or Lynn has $100 less to has $100 left to spend after she pays the $200 fee. So yes, she would have enough money to pay for 3 hours. So it says if H represents the number of hours, what does 22.50 times H plus 200 represent? So we know that represents the total cost for renting the hall. Okay, so for D, it says to write and solve an equation to determine the number of hours that Lynn can rent the community center. So up here I wrote an inequality. So it's still the same thing, except it just wants an equation. So I know this is the total cost, and I can only spend $300. So my equation would be $22.50 times the number of hours plus the $200 fee must equal $300 to tell me the number of hours. So it also wants us to determine the number of hours, so I just solve it. So minus 200 from each side. So that means the rental for the hours has to equal $100. So if I divide both sides by the hourly rate, then that tells me that the number of hours must equal 4.4 repeating. So 4.4 repeating hours. So if they charge by the whole hour, then she could only rent it for 4 hours. E wants you to write and solve an inequality, which we had already written up here. So the only difference is that it can be less than or equal to $300 because I can't spend more than that. So $22.50 times H plus 200 has to be less than or equal to $300. So it's the exact same steps to solve. So divide both sides by $22.50. And now that tells me that my number of hours has to be less than or equal to 4.4 repeating hours.